live from Oakland, California. Welcome, listeners, welcome, listeners, to today's episode of the Black Business Roundtable. And I am your host, Doug Blackshear, broadcasting live to you from Oakland, California, the city of diversity. Today, we want to take a minute out to say a prayer for our brother, Larry Lewis. He was admitted into the hospital a couple of days ago. So let's take a minute and just to prayer for him. Lord, we pray for our brother, touch his heart, body, mind, and soul. Give him the strength to overcome any ailment, that any demons could infiltrate his body and extract that out, because only you have the power. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We want to, Larry, and I know you're watching, we want to wish you a speedy recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And from my understanding, Larry was released yesterday. So everyone, make sure you get that prayer wagon out and we get our brother back here.
Mm-hmm.
He has a special input and perspective to this show. Larry, we wish you a speedy recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Special community job announcement. Tesla is hosting a production associate and materials hiring event on July 31st. Tesla will also be offering second chance employee opportunity, a first chance opportunity after they get out of the correctional institution. They're going to be hiring, whether you have been in the correctional institution of the women's or men, they will be hiring you to fill positions in their facility. So keep in mind, this is an awesome opportunity for those who are inspired to work at Tesla, but were not able to do their background check in the past. Registration required at tinyurl.com/Tesla Center. So remember, just because you had a bad break in life, this is a second chance to a first-class living. Thank you very much. Check it out. Good paying jobs, from my understanding. The job lead was brought to you by Melody Castro. Melody Castro was recognized on this show about a month ago for her dedication and community work for poverty-ridden neighborhoods in Oakland, for homelessness, and for holding our politicians accountable when they try to do the wrong thing or they're doing the wrong thing. Melody Davis, thank you very much for that lead. And just so that you know, moving forward, we will be having a Melody Davis employment corner. So each week she's going to be sending me job opportunities that she gets directly from the County of Alameda and other agencies in the Alameda, Oakland area, so that you can tell our brothers and sisters whether they have been incarcerated or not. There's opportunity for good paying jobs for people who look like you and my sister, Dr. Ashley, here on TV, on the show today. A special thanks to our Magnolia Engineering and Construction. Magnolia, congratulations, Tammy Willis, on their new website. That's Magnolia Engineering and Construction.com. I took a look at it today. Magnolia, I anticipate some great opportunity for you and some great chances to demonstrate how Black women are making this world a better place. Thank you, Magnolia Engineering and Construction. Today's show highlights the soul of our youth. Let me be clear. Our youth have demonstrated that they have the capability of doing great things. They just need some leadership from some of us, as we call it in our neighborhood, our OGs. OGs could be old guys or old gals, but don't take it negatively, because these young people, if we come at them correctly, they will look, listen, learn, and then act. The soul of our youth in politics, home life, and education. We sure are looking are overlooking our youth and need to consider our youth and the important role we all have in the lives of our youth. All right. And let me back up just a tad. You always know I have a sidebar here. Dr. Ashley, I remember when you were a youth, and that shows you how old I am. You have had the best positive role models that I can think of, because I was one of them. But I look at you today, Dr. Ashley, you have demonstrated with good leadership, good family, and friend role model, anything is possible. And I want our listeners to understand, Dr. Ashley, I've known her since she was, oh my God, what, 8, 9, 5?
Pigtails,
Yes.
Dr. Ashley.
You are a shining example of what hard work and dedication and good influence can do for you. Thank you, Dr. Ashley, for joining us on the show and being a contributing factor for the success of this show.
Thank you.
Our guests today also include, as I have already given her accolade, Dr. Ashley Coleman, Doctor of Psychology, Department Chair, Assistant Professor of Psychology at University of the West. Welcome again, Dr. Ashley. And I love saying welcome because it's a pleasure working with you. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Also want to welcome our guest, Katrina Holmani, pronounced Holmani, ACSW, PPS, Associate Clinical Social Worker in the San Lorenzo Unified School District for 6 years. Welcome, Dr. Elizabeth Burke, Professor and Clinical Psychologist, Assistant Professor at the University of the West. I think I know somebody. All right, next guest is Joseph Hancock, Associate Clinical Social Worker, co-founder of Love Lab SF, and reside in Vermont. And that takes us to our special guest, our next assembly member, Janani Ramachandri, Esquire, California 18th Assembly District Special Election. She, with her running mate, or the other person who's going to be running against her, and I'm not going to mention her name because Janani, I am proud of you. I've had the opportunity to watch you briefly and learn about you and read about you. And I saw what you did last night in that candidates debate. So I'm going to throw my hands up and I'm going to say, take it away, Janani.
Hello, everyone. Thank you both for having me back again. It's such a privilege and honor to be here. We sure had a debate last night. Me and my opponent, who will not get any airtime on whose name will not get any airtime on your show. I decided to go all in on the issues that I cared about and to call out behavior that I find unethical, problematic, and needing to be addressed. If you are for the cause, you should back that up by not taking contributions from the industries blocking those very causes. It's pretty simple to me. But I will just mention one quote my opponent said because it is gold and I'm going to use this every time. Having worked in the nonprofit sector for years, I'll take money from anyone who's willing to give it. And I don't know if that's the kind of policymaker you want in Sacramento representing you. Sure. That's not what I stand for, and that's not what most of my supporters want.
Oh, Doug, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, Janani. When I look at our new assembly person, the person's going to represent not just Alameda or San Leandro, but Alameda, San Leandro, and Oakland. I look forward to you winning. And today's topic that we have is called The Youth and Politics and Oakland, to keep in line with our theme, the soul of our youth. Possible questions that I have for you. The first one is, just take a moment. Your debate last night left your competition stunned on the stage like a deer in the wrong set of headlights. You shed a light on all her faults. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because when I finished listening to you and I looked at her, you would have thought that she was on the wrong stage. Can you carry us away with what do you think your highlights were? And I can tell you what they were because I watched it 2 or 3 times. Thank you.
The only thing that I care about doing is speaking truth, is being honest, is representing the voices of communities I belong to, communities that surround me, communities that make Oakland as beautiful as what it is, and Alameda and San Leandro, but especially Oakland. And all I said was the truth. All I asked were honest questions. And the benefit that I have as someone that is relatively young in the political game is not being a career politician, is not having to have the baggage of years of believing this is what politicians should look like, this is how they should act, this is what they should do. All I know are the laws that are not working for the people. And those are the issues I highlight. I don't care about the political game. Can I learn the rules? Can I learn to build coalitions? Absolutely. I had not thought about politics seriously until about 7 months ago when I decided to run for this seat. Before that, my background was in activism, was working with communities, direct services, legal services, social services. That's my background. That's my body of experience, and one that's missing. It's also, so I am 29 years old, and there are a lot of politicians a couple of decades ago who were 29 years old when they started, especially male politicians. Joe Biden was elected to the U.S. Senate at 29. Elihu Harris ran for this state assembly seat at 29 years old. There are so many others. I mean, we have civil rights leaders who were well into their careers at 29, who were public figures, who were marching and protesting and authoring books and articles, and real public figures at my age. But now all of a sudden, to get into politics, you need to be in the game for 25 years. And my opponent yesterday, almost to make herself sound better, said, I have 30 years of experience. And I wanted to say, I'm not even 30 years old, and I'm still beating you in this debate. So I don't know what that experience is, but it's not helping you now, and it's not what voters want. It's energy and ideas, and that's what I think younger voices bring. There are incredible political leaders in their 20s, in their early 30s, and whatnot that bring a different energy. Now, sure, you need experience. You need some kind of experience, in my opinion, to be a good policymaker. But there are so many different life experiences that you can have to bring to the table. We see that in Congress now. We have Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, AOC, all these incredible women who were not career politicians, but they're mothers, they're survivors of violence, they're nurses. There's so many other things that are meaningful to be a good policymaker. Years of experience in the ivory tower is not one of them.
Well, another thing that I'd like to bring to the attention of our audience and our listeners out there, our youth are more politically aware and active now. And how can we have them participate in the political process in a positive way in the 2021 and beyond? Because you being 21 or 21, you look 21, you being 29 years old, We need more young people like you. And I'm not going to tell you my age, 58. I'm not going to tell you my age, but if I had the energy, the foresight, the dedication, the commitment, the selflessness that you are bringing, maybe I could have made a difference. But as you already know, I'm out there hitting the ground for you, sister. I don't know if you see all those signs coming around town, but I don't know how they're getting out there, but they're getting out there. And I need some more, by the way. But can you tell our listeners how they can get involved and how you can activate, ignite that excitement that you have, but in other young people? Because I'm going to say this, and it's going to hurt some of these old G's, and I say old, triple O, double, triple G old. We have a lot of old people who are clogging up the system. The reason why a lot of young people do not get involved, whether it is a nonprofit organization like the NAACP, or if it's a government job where we have city, county, and state politicians who are 70 and 80 years old, who are just clogging up. Instead of training people like you, they're sitting in those seats and clogging that pipeline up. Tell us how you can say something that would ignite them to get them started. Thank you.
It's the fact that politics matters. And a lot of young people, for good reason, might be jaded. They're tired. They think, oh, all politicians are the same. They're tired. They don't understand what we need. They don't serve us. They don't look like us, whatever it is. Because it's true. When you look at the last election, 21% of registered voters turned out. And these are only registered voters. And that's an incredibly low number. And it's not young people that showed up to vote. It's definitely not, that's not the majority of voters. I would love for every single person 18 and above, 18 through my age, to vote, because I know if they vote, they'd vote for me. But it's giving people a reason to vote. And for me, what I'm trying to do when I canvass, when I'm out there, when our volunteers are out there, is show that state government matters. The average voter, half of my friends included, don't know what the state assembly does. Oh, what's that? Who, they don't know the incumbent at all, let alone his wife. Friends of mine born and raised in Oakland have no idea who Rob Honta is, frankly, a lot of the time. You sometimes know your city council member, maybe your mayor, maybe your governor. That's about it. And I think that has to change, and that is slowly changing. So the difference is, and what I'm trying to showcase is, if I focus on policies, if I talk about living wages, defending against evictions, mental health services, supporting small businesses, if I talk about things in a concrete way, not in these vague terms that my opponent uses when she talks about policies, I give concrete reasons why you should vote at all. I think that's important. Or start a conversation with, hey, have you heard of the state assembly? Do you know what they do? How are they can they fix the pothole on your street? Technically, no, but they can give the funding to the city of Oakland to make sure your pothole is covered.
Can I ask you something, and such that our viewers will know exactly what a state assembly person do? Can you, because we have a few minutes before, because I know your schedule is extremely busy. And let me be clear, and let me say this so that you understand. Once you are elected, and you will be elected, I want you to be coming back onto the show when your time permits, of course. But tell us exactly what an assembly member does and how important it is to our community. Thank you.
The state assembly is like Congress for California. The biggest thing is they control our budgets. When most of our funding, for example, for homelessness services comes from the state. Funding for our hospital system comes from the state. Public education, very much controlled by the state. The decision for the state government to take over OUSD and Oakland Public Schools. That was the state's decision. Whether tenants' rights laws, whether or not single-family homes can be covered under Oakland's rent control, that's up to the state. Most of our criminal laws, can 16-year-olds be charged as adults for crimes? Should individuals convicted of misdemeanors have to pay exorbitant fines and fees? That's all up to the state. A lot of traffic laws, family court laws. If you have a child custody case or a divorce or a wedding, all of marriage, all of these things come from state laws, and the state has the power of the purse, and it has the power to affect most things in our everyday lives. That flow, now funding flows to cities, but a lot of things are only in the control of the state.
Now that was an explanation that even I understand. And see, what you are doing is you are being able to articulate in layman terms what exactly the role of an assembly member is. Because the last assembly member, who I think, from what I recall, is related to the person who's, I could be wrong, but I believe they're related. I never knew what their job was. The way you just articulated, young sister, please keep doing that. And I say, young sisters, for those listeners out there and those parents out there and those aunties and uncles out there, look at this young lady here. This is our future. This is the leader, and she brings the message that's going to make a difference. I would like to say, Janani, with the 7 minutes we have left, what encouraging words can you give your constituents? And I do say your constituents because you will be elected. What will you bring, and how will you bring it? And then I'm going to let our listeners know how to get in touch with your campaign online so that they can understand better what you are going to be doing for Oakland, Alameda, and San Leandro. And we desperately need help because things are falling apart here. Thank you.
At the core of my messaging, it's all about inclusion. There are too many people whose voices are not represented in politics. And why? Because most average individuals don't fund campaigns. Big corporations do. Large tech companies, big insurance companies, the oil and gas industry. These are the big players who decide how an assembly member votes a lot of the time. It's a big problem.
I got to ask you a question. How much money are you getting from those big corporate donors?
Zero.
How much money is your opponent getting from those big corporate donors?
So far, over $1 million.
Well, let me just tell you what I do know. I think a nonprofit organization, which is not nonprofit, the Oakland Promise, according to reports, and tell me if I'm wrong, it's not legally a nonprofit because their filing papers haven't been filed, and they have over $70 million. And I believe your opponent has a salary last year of $190,000 from that nonprofit organization. Can you just, I mean, you don't have to even elaborate on it, but I just wanted to know, do you know anything about that? And if so, you can just give a nod or just wink, but you are fighting Goliath, David. And I am very, very impressed how you have chose, and from my understanding, you've given money back to big corporations like whoever had donated to you, that you made it clear that you will not be influenced by big money, unlike other politicians.
I sure did.
How much? Oh,
No, and it's It's the principle of the matter. Why should a special election race, especially when you already are Goliath, when you have all of the famous last name, political power, why do you need $3 million against someone like me? What are you scared of?
How much do you have? And
I
how much have you generated compared to that $3 million giant you're fighting right now?
I have raised about $215,000 from over 750 small individual donors.
So let me be clear so we get these numbers right, because I was always good at math. You have less than $250,000 that you generated, and you came in second, and your opponent raised over $1.2 million, and she came in first. She got 37% of the vote, and I believe you got 21%. Is that correct?
24.
24. Well, I'm sorry. Go girl.
Mhm.
Janani, as we wrap this up here, I want to say you got my vote. You got my friend's vote. I've been changing family members, how they vote, and keep doing what you're doing. We need you out there. We need the change of political dynasty who are enriching a few while the masses starve, go homeless, and have no health care, make less than $15 an hour. And what was your on your agenda to for our uh, people to make the minimum wage? What was that number again? I think I'm sure it was quite higher than $15 an hour, which won't buy you a shed in the Bay Area.
At least $22 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And you know who makes over $22 an hour? Members of the ILWU.
I'm sure Trent Willis and Melvin McKay would love to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
We've enjoyed having you on the show
Mhm.
today. You are always welcome back. This show, the Black Business Roundtable, supports you and your mission, and we wish you much success, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr.
so much.
Ashley,
Thanks,
Dr. Ashley, I kind of took it over, but we have 2 minutes left. Did you have anything to say? Because I get excited when I see you.
No, I understand, Janani. It's always great to see you. I did actually have one question as I was doing research. Research says, as we're, talking about youth today, that internships and jobs actually prevent youth involvement in negative experiences. And when I think about being a young girl from Oakland, California, I have to highlight Mr. Scott Lafranchi, he and his brother were owners of the Silver Screen Video Enterprise. They had 8 locations in the Bay Area. And 20 years ago, he hired me as I was a 16-year-old in Oakland Public Schools and paid me $8 per hour to work in the video store. And so I'm wondering, once you are elected, what are your plans to encourage or incentivize small businesses, as well as others, to provide internships to youth, and not just youth that are in their, communities or whatnot, but the youth in Oakland that really need that experience, and also throughout District 18?
We need to do away with unpaid internships. Firstly, that's a hierarchical system. It doesn't work. I would love to have plenty of interns on my staff, and I want to make sure every one of them are paid $22 an hour. The last weekend of our campaign, we hired paid canvassers who usually get about $15 an hour. We had limited funds, of course, but we made sure everyone got 22. And you know what? Those canvassers, who are mostly high school and college students, they were so good at their job. They were motivated to be part of this movement where you don't have to work multiple jobs to make ends meet. If you're in school, you should get to focus on school and have your one part-time job. You shouldn't have to juggle 2, 3 jobs to support your family and go to school. Folks in college, folks in community colleges who have dropped out at a high rate during this pandemic because they're trying to make ends meet to provide for their families. If so many of these individuals were able to work one job instead of multiple and get to focus on school or family or home or raising a child, that would change our ecosystem. If the state was able to fund internship programs for small business owners, because of course it's a cost, that would do so much good for everyone. It could help the small business. It could inspire that child to become an entrepreneur themselves. It could gives a child something to do with their time. It could improve public safety. There's so many positives of that. The state has the money to step in and do things like that, but it's chosen to not prioritize it. And why? Because small businesses don't have a seat at the table in Sacramento.
Thank you. Thank you.
Janani Ramachandran, let me say this emphatically. I can't wait till the next debate. You kicked her butt. And wait a minute, that's not you saying it. That's Art Douglas Blackshear saying it. I watched it twice. She looked like a deer in the headlights running against a Mack truck. Keep up the good work. I'm very proud of you, sister. And I'm going to be by to pick up some more lawn signs and door hangers. And we're going to put you in office so you can make a difference. The next generation of leaders. God bless. And thank you for joining the show. We'll see you next week, right?
Of course. I'll be here.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Well, everyone, I guess you got a nice dose of our new assembly member and understand exactly what assembly member job is. We would like to now go for the news of the day. On this day in history, July 15, 1954, the U.S. government staged mass deportation in the American Southwest, courtesy of Equal Justice Initiative. Visit calendar.eji.org for more information and to read the full story of this day and our Black and Brown history. We mentioned these ladies last week and will continue to do so on the Black Business Roundtable podcast show. They are political, they are women, and they are campaigning. Nina Turner is running for Congress, 2021 Ohio's 11th Congressional District Special Election as incumbent Representative Marcia Fudge is now serving as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development with the Biden administration. Now, I think you all remember when I constantly kept saying Biden, Harris, and Harris for president. I foresee Harris being president because our sisters out here are making a huge difference. And Dr. Ashley, you are one of them. Thank you. Keep up the good work. We need leadership from queens like you and the rest of these Black women, queens out there who are stepping out and stepping up to lead this country out of its terrible situation it is right now after the red man has the pink man, orange man. What did Barbara Lee call him? Congress Barbara Lee call him the the yellow man. But thank you, sisters. Keep up the good work. Election date for the Nina Turner congressional seat, special election, Ohio's 11th 2021 election is November 2nd. Voter registration, October 4th. Val Demings, 2022 Senate campaign, former Orlando police chief, seeking to upset little Marco Rubio. And I use that term because our previous president said, little Marco Rubio with the little hands, pack your little bags, take your little tennis shoes, and you run back home. We want to support Val Demings as our next Florida Senate for senator in Florida, running for the Senate. Her tagline is never tire. Election date, November 8th, 2022. Weekly check-in with our very own Dr. Ashley Coleman. Doctor, I apologize for having you go second, but we had Janani for the first half. And you see, I've been stumbling because I didn't get your dose. So please give us a dose of Dr. Ashley Coleman, Doctor of Psychology. Thank you.
Thank you. The name of the game, Doug, first of all, it's always a privilege to be here. And the name of the game is flexibility. As you know, we've been talking about stress management, and sometimes we just have to let things flow. Um, Today, I'm so excited about our next segment as we'll be embarking on discussion about topics that are really, really important to our community. But I must admit that we have to preface this conversation. And it's because remembering at the Black Business Roundtable, we're talking about how to reach back, pull forward, give opportunities. And in order to be solution focused, though, we have to agree upon the challenges and we have to, acknowledge them and tackle them head on. And so, in the coming minutes, when our mental health professionals arrive, we're going to be discussing topics such as stress with COVID. What's happening in the family? What went well? What did we learn about ourselves? What do our children need? The importance of mental health. And so there are going to be some statistics shared that, we've pulled up about what's happening. And we have representatives from the Bay Area, from Southern California, as well as from the East Coast. But even as I'm talking right now, I'm noticing my stomach is tight because we're going to also talk about substance use. And again, things that are impacting our youth and what we can do to solve them. So in order to get ourselves prepared for that conversation, if you can join me, Doug, you're already assuming the deep breath. You're ready. You knew where I was going with this. And we can just take a deep breath in and exhale. And take another deep breath in, but this time just allowing our shoulders to touch our ears. And then as we exhale, dropping those shoulders even more. And another deep breath in and exhaling. And so throughout our discussion coming up and just noticing anytime we're talking about sensitive topics, it's important for us to do that body scan, to know when we're becoming activated, to become curious about what we're responding to. Are we hearing something? Are we from our panelists that impacts us directly? Are we hearing questions that we can actually use to talk to our children about what they may be feeling? And so I invite our listeners to just take mental notes or actually physical notes about some of the great information that they'll be hearing going forward and how to have this discussion about the soul of our youth. And remembering too, no matter our age, that our youth are having different lived experiences. We're in different generations. And so how things impact them can be different, what they're willing to talk about. And so preparing ourselves to hold space for them is important.
Dr. Ashley, if you notice, every time you talk, when I come back on, it's like I'm taking a Valium. Thank you for that. We really appreciate it. I would like to give a formal introduction today to our guests from the West Coast to the East Coast. Mm-hmm. First, up today is Katrina Holmani, and I've been practicing saying your name.
Yeah.
Associate Clinical Social Worker will discuss the impact of COVID-19 on children and community stressors our children are facing. Katrina has been an Associate Clinical Social Worker for San Lorenzo Unified School District for 6 years. She provided clinical services to K through 12 age children. As a member of the Coordination of Services Team, acronyms COAST, and community advocate, Katrina served on the front line during the pandemic by delivering food for families and providing crisis counseling to clients. Additionally, Katrina has presented to administrators and the school board regarding the impact of police presence in school and providing alternative to de-escalation of conflict. Welcome, Katrina.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Hi, Katrina. And also, we're going to continue with our next introduction of our panelists. I see that we have my colleague, Dr. Elizabeth Burke, has joined, as well as Joseph Hancock. So please let me go ahead and introduce the all-star panel that we've assembled here. Thank you all so much. So next introduction is my colleague, Dr. Elizabeth Burke, professor and clinical psychologist. She is an assistant professor at University of the West, and she earned her Bachelor of Arts in Linguistics from UCLA and a doctoral degree in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University. I may know a little bit about that. And Dr. Burke specializes in multicultural counseling as well as trauma-focused psychology, really emphasizing humanistic and African-centered approaches. And in addition to be a professor and a clinical psychologist, she directs a literacy program for youth in South Los Angeles. And she's also published in the areas of autism and adults, historical trauma, and trauma recovery, and spirituality in children and adolescents. Welcome, Dr. Burke. And last but not least, Mr. Joseph Hancock, who is a native of San Francisco and is the co-founder of Love Laugh SF, which is a consulting business supporting organizations through professional training, mental health services, and social justice advocacy. He received his Master's of Social Work from San Francisco State University with a concentration in individuals, families, and groups. He's currently residing in Vermont and is the postgraduate counseling fellow at Middlebury College in Middlebury, Vermont. And his unique educational and professional experiences, coupled with his own journey to mental health, have centered his belief in optimizing our mental health as the foundation of all equity work. In addition, when he's not impacting our community positively, he also DJs. So thank you again to our panelists. So I wanted to start off, all of you, why I call you guys all stars. We have representatives here from all aspects of mental health, providing services K through 12, in addition to our collegiate students as well. So I want to start with you, Katrina. Prior to COVID, let's start there. What are the top 3 stressors that you noted in the students that you worked with?
Yeah, I think prior to COVID, there was, one of the hugest things that we noticed as educators is the behavior issues basically went away when COVID happened, right? Because we don't have the same access to the students as we did when they were in the classroom. So when we look at trauma and how trauma gets exhibited, whether it's being withdrawn, internalized, or if it's externalized, where we have defiancy and things like that, when we look at students and their trauma, we can't address it because we don't have access to those behaviors that we were able to try and target and address when they were in person. So definitely seeing, there's always, especially in San Lorenzo community, we have a lot of impoverished families. We have a lot of refugees, a lot of immigration. We are a safe haven school district. So we do not, we don't work with ICE. We protect our families to make sure that they can feel safe coming to our communities, letting us know statuses so that we can get them all the resources that they can privy to. But definitely the basic needs is a huge thing, whether it is food, whether it is housing, homelessness, job security, all of those things were definitely huge stressors prior to the pandemic, and definitely got exacerbated as the pandemic went on.
Okay, great. And Joseph, how does that compare on the other side of the bridge under the community work that you were doing in the city? What did you note were the needs prior to COVID?
So first, let me thank you for having me on. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. And yeah, similar in young adults. Young adults I was supporting in the community colleges. Very similar struggles. Food insecurity, housing insecurity. Obviously, financial insecurity is a major one. I think that that's just across the board. But it's interesting for young adults because they are in this part of their developmental journey where they see themselves as adults, and they would like to be treated in that way. So I think one of the complexities that comes with being a young adult in the community college level specifically is this point in time where you feel like you are making headway into the next step. And to see that, take a pause and address some of those like the insecurities I was talking about before, to really approach those with a heavy microscope, So yeah, I would say they're all similar, similar across the board. Again, different age group. So a lot of those community college students were actually parents or breadwinners or support systems for their siblings. So again, everything is exacerbated during this time.
Yes, thank you. And then I know, Dr. Burke, you being in Southern California, in addition to your collegiate work, how are the needs of your students that were in your summer program, we know in South LA, which is formerly known as South Central Los Angeles for those, there's been a rebranding similar to the East 14th to International Boulevard rebranding we saw in the Bay Area. But can you speak on the needs that you noted, again, pre-pandemic needs of the members of your summer program?
I think pre-pandemic needs were really food insecurity and financial insecurity. Those things were prevalent, and behavioral issues. Just like Katrina had mentioned, these things, anytime it was okay to express frustration, anger, and things like that, but it wasn't okay to express sadness or worry or insecurity. That's what I noticed. And I worked with elementary school children from the 3rd grade all through junior high school, all the way to the 12th grade in the summer program in South LA. However, yes, Doug. After you.
I have a question, because when you said International Boulevard in Oakland, that I've been in Oakland for 58 years. I know I don't look that young, but yes, I've been in Oakland for 58 years. And the degradation that is between Durant and International, aka East 14th, all the way down to Lake Merritt. I've had an opportunity to see young brothers and sisters who see all the construction work going on down there, all the road work going on down there. And when they don't see people who look like who's on the screen here, how do you think that affects them? And how can I, as an advocate of Black Business Roundtable, go out there and push these politicians, and not Janani, because she already knows, but the politicians out there who refuse to have training programs, to have intern programs, to have project managing programs. When these young boys and girls do not see a light at the end of the tunnel, when they're not able to go to college or junior college, and let's just be brutally honest here, we have teenagers having children, and they need to have jobs to raise these children, and not just at McDonald's and Burger King. What advice can you give me? Because you can Google me and find out that I go out there and take on King Kong as well as an ant. What can I do when I'm down there as a delegate in the Alameda Central Committee, Democratic Party. What can I go down there and tell when I'm the only black man or one of few black men in that party? What can I say to these people who don't look like me, how we are hurting our black and brown boys and girls out there, and what they can do to give them hope, light, and not a hand out, but a hand up. Thank you.
So in that, how can we advocate for our youth to have opportunities? And I think that is definitely an important question. So I'll let you answer that, and then we can also highlight some more of the unique stressors that are impacting our youth.
I think I'll just jump in on this first. One of the things that stands out is, we don't, a lot of the youth that I was fortunate enough to serve, there's a lot of equity issues, and especially in terms of technology. So they don't even get to sit at the table as an option or even get an opportunity. A lot of the students in the summer program that I was in didn't have a working computer. Didn't have a camera. If they did have a computer, it didn't have a camera, didn't have a microphone. And then a lot of the students were on their phone or their parents' phone in the beginning of the pandemic just to get to class. And you can't really learn that way. There's a barrier to that. And so what's really interesting is that COVID turned everything online. And so we're able to do everything online now. However, if there is a disparity in the technology, and you don't have access to it, and you don't have Wi-Fi, and you don't have the technology, you don't have the equipment, you're just not even, you don't even have the opportunity. So let's start there.
I'm sorry. Can we continue on with that theme? Because all of you, I had the privilege, thank you so much, of checking in with you as fellow mental health professionals. All of you were on the front lines, right? And we're people first. And then we have our callings and our professions. So if we can continue along with that theme that Dr. Burke mentioned, what did being on the front lines look for each of you? So Joseph and then Katrina, you guys jump in.
Yeah, I think it's a struggle when we as mental health providers want to support students, but they don't have the basics to receive that support. I think in my situation, this was a lot of first-time meetings with students, and we often hear the popular number is 1 in a therapeutic setting. That's about as many times as you might see a client or a student in this case. So it was always a struggle to build a rapport. How do you build a rapport with a student that you've never seen before, or the student hasn't seen me before, and the expectation is that they're supposed to open up to me and feel comfortable in doing that. And that, I think, that's a lot to ask for someone. Again, we were all new to this for the most part. So I think everyone being, as you said, being first responders, educators being included in that conversation as well, because I think as we're talking about mental health and talking about therapy and normalizing this conversation, we have to kind of define what therapy is and what that is for different people. So maybe that, if you're supporting a student as a teacher, then there is a therapeutic relationship between you and the student. And during that time, you could hear it if you were in your meetings, or I'm sure everyone was bombarded with meetings, continue to be. But there was essentially a lack of support for everyone. And so teachers were teachers, social workers, therapists. When you are when you're stressed, how can you expect, we're supposed to, yeah, this is the thing to talk about.
Right.
So who's supporting those people? Right. And so I think those were some of the things that I really noticed early on in terms of trying to support students with whatever they were navigating.
And Doug, we'll get to you just one sec. I just want to give Katrina an opportunity to talk about the work she did in the community, because I know, again, as Joseph, as you're highlighting, Katrina, we had to kind of stretch ourselves outside of the traditional role, leaving that therapeutic office. And in the field, we have a saying that says, meet our clients where they are. And some of us, we actually go into the field. Katrina, can you tell us about what did your work look like during COVID?
Yeah, just to piggyback what Dr. Burke said about technology was definitely like first and foremost the biggest issue we had right off the bat. And it was really about our district pulling together to make sure that every student had an opportunity to pick up a Chromebook. We have a lot of families that are doubled up. So you may have 6 or 7 kids in a household that are sharing the same Wi-Fi. So their Wi-Fi was not good enough to sustain Zoom and all of that. But even just respecting like students' privacies, you know, like you're invading their home and their space, and they may not have a personal space to be on the classroom. So teachers were getting frustrated with students not having cameras on, but we had to explain to them that they may not want to show their background of having so many people or whatever their living situation. We had students in cars that had Wi-Fi. We gave them hotspots so that they can still access school, you know, even out of a car, because Starbucks was closed, so it's not like they could go there, you know, especially in the early days of the pandemic where everything was just shut down. They couldn't go to the library or access any of the community places that we would typically send students after school to go get resources, right? So that was definitely first, like, and I was dropping off computers because we had students that weren't able, you know, parents couldn't bring them to the pickup date or the pickup time. So I may have to go do a drop off of a Wi-Fi hotspot or a computer or whatever it is, or they break and things don't work on them, you know. And so there was a lot of the technology. The other thing I would say is just the access to the students. So to piggyback on what Joseph was talking about, is just, you know, one, going with privacy. These kids, you know, they don't have a private space to have an individual conversation, so they may not be as authentic with us because they, you know, their parents are right there hovering. And that's even if I could get access. It was usually easier with the high school kids because a lot of them have their own cell phones and things. But for the elementary, you know, I have to call the parents to access them. Whereas when I'm in the schools, I can pop by a classroom and just say, you know, hey, Johnny, let's go do a check-in really quick, you know, and technically, you know, we're supposed to get consent, but because of my role, I can do check-ins with students without having to do parental consent. Luckily, that was, you know, as a part of my role, but through COVID, I have to talk to the parent because that's the only way I can get in touch with the student. And that's if there's a working phone number. And language barriers was a huge thing because we're talking to a lot of parents that maybe don't speak English. And so that was challenging as well, and having to find translators and all of that. And of course, there's a huge stigma around mental health. And so there's a lot of parents that were like, no, you don't need to talk to my student. But then the teacher's asking me to do this check-in because they're seeing things in the Zoom class. So there was just a lot of that I was seeing initially and just throughout the school year and accessing the students.
And before we transition to Doug, Katrina, you mentioned, I know offline, but can you tell us about the food insecurity and how you responded to that?
Yeah, so initially it was nice because they were giving out free food. They just kind of made it blanket for everybody. And then they tried to do something where they switched it for a little while, but then they went back to just anyone can come and pick up. And but even then it was hard because with transportation and access, you know, there was still a lot of needing to contact, especially our McKinney-Vento with our homeless and foster youth families, making sure that they had access. And so it was a lot of contacting to make sure that, you know, we started doing working with Alameda County Food Bank to have a pickup. And, you know, so I would go pick up boxes from our food site for families that weren't able to come by and pick up, and then go and do drop-offs with them. So they had the basic things like eggs and milk and vegetables and fruits, but then we also had every day we would have school lunches that would have breakfast. They ended up switching it to like come Monday and it'll give you 3 days worth of food and things like that. And you could just come and it was anybody in the community that was able to. And we had every school that had pickups to allow students. And I mean, granted with school lunches, nutrition also becomes an issue and whether kids like it or not, but I mean, there were definitely families that took it and they would run out of food, especially in the beginning. And this was before the pandemic EBT came out to allow support for students with free reduced lunch. And so they were definitely a lot of families that were just, struggling in terms of, because the cost. I will say one thing that was a plus was because of the eviction moratorium, we didn't see the impact of people not being able to pay their rent and them getting evicted. So that was something that I will say was somewhat positive. We'll see when it goes away in September, what the repercussions are going to be for that. I do know that there is a program out here that's for Alameda County where they're going to be paying back rent for a lot of families. So I've definitely been trying to connect a lot of families to, they're going to pay like landlords the back rent so that people aren't, I'm not sure about mortgages or not, but I think that gets tacked onto their loan or something of that sort. But definitely the rental piece. There are programs out here that San Leandro, unincorporated Alameda County, and Oakland. I know I've seen those particular ones for those cities to refer families to, because we have families all over. Even though we're San Lorenzo, we definitely have families in different cities that come to our schools. So providing those resources to families as well. But that has been the blessing, is having that moratorium so that families at least know that they have a home to go to. Whether they can pay for other things, is another issue, but at least they've been secure with that. And there does seem to be programs to allow them to not get evicted once the moratorium is over.
And that's big given the impact of homelessness and gentrification, right, in the Bay Area as well. We're seeing that in Los Angeles as well. Doug, you were going to?
Dr. Ashley, you have put together a group of magnificent, and I can say this because I'm 50-something, young people here who are making a difference. And I'd like to tell all of you the psychological impact on our children, because either they're suffering from poverty, not, as you said, Katrina, that they don't want people to see the 50 people who are living in one-bedroom home, or the obstacles and the psychological damage that's done to these kids, and it's hard for them to stay on. So I'm taking note while I'm listening. But for Dr. Elizabeth Burke, and I believe Joseph Hancock and Katrina Holmani, I'm here in Oakland, California. I make it my mission to advocate for groups like yours. So please, at the end of this show, let's exchange contact information, because they have a lot of resources for food. You can't save the youth soul if you can't put food in their stomach. So I'm going to quit there. But you can't save a youth soul if their stomach is yelling at them. So continue. I'm thank you for having me on today. This is amazing.
I'm so glad. So Katrina, you left off by saying stigma. So let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about the stigma of mental health in the Black and Brown communities. And here we are all as clinicians. So a question for all of you. Can you kind of share, again, some information about what is therapy and how can we advocate for members of the Black and Brown communities to access these services?
Well, I can start off, in the summer program. So I work with this awesome organization called Community Coalition in South Los Angeles. And like I said, in this summer program, one of the things that I was in charge of was the director of mental health and wellness. So mental health is offered to every student in the program. So they can speak to someone one-on-one. They can speak. They could have a family session if they needed to. They could have just with their parent, with the whole family. It could be a behavioral intervention, whatever it is they need. We even did grief counseling and things, because that was a big deal. One of the things that happened was that young people, their family members were dying, and then they still had to log on. And it was very, very difficult because they wouldn't speak about that. And they just would not speak about it. And it was very, very tough. And then because one of the things that we did, and the whole program was online, but one of the things that we did was we would just, pull kids out to offer them prizes, or look at the prize store or something like that. But once we got them one-on-one, we can talk to them and say, I heard that your auntie died in Mexico. How are you feeling? And then that was the way, because kids weren't like, oh, I'll take a session. Kids weren't doing that. But, and Joseph laughs because we're not there yet. That would be great if we could be. Another thing is that, mental health services was offered to the parents as well. That is where it really, really took off, and it started to reduce the stigma because the parents were taking advantages of the services. The parents they weren't like, I'll take a session. They weren't saying that, but they were definitely like, Dr. Burke, can I talk to you for a second after? And then we can make plans and have sessions and things like that. It was really beautiful, because then we were able to create an online community of where it was like a parent session. Like, let's all have a parent group discuss about what are the issues that are going on. And one of the biggest things that the parents were talking about was anxiety for their kids and depression in their kids and loneliness and isolation. And even though the kids were isolated and lonely, they became even more isolated and lonely. And parents asked about that. So we worked on it.
And how was that? Thank you. Katrina, did you see a similar level of parental involvement, given that you work K through 12? What was your experience?
Yeah, it's definitely sometimes difficult to get parents to get involved, which I think is one of the reasons that dragged me or enticed me to go to the schools, is because I feel like that's where I can have access to the youth very easily. Because if most kids, even if they're not excelling, even if they're not even going to class, like, they're typically on campus somewhere, whether they're ditching or whatever, like, it's usually a place that, that they come to get out of their house and all of that. Definitely seeing the isolation. I'll never forget it was so impactful, the very first day of school that we opened up, because we were closed all year, and we opened just for part-time, like a hybrid model, in April. And so I went to go support the first day of school, because we had, a huge check-in process to do screening questions and masks and all of that type of stuff. And I supported the elementary school on the first day, and these kids were like, not crying. They were like, bye, mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever dropped them off. They were like, see you later. I'm ready to go, like, get out this house, and so it's interesting to see just, normally first day of school for kindergartens, they're all crying like, mommy, don't leave me. And so it was definitely different seeing how, like, these kids were even ready to just get out and get into a different space. I think for me, it's mostly like, one of my focuses is building the community. So we do a lot of restorative practices in San Lorenzo Unified. And so we do a lot of circles. I'm in the classroom and doing a lot of the community building. And it was interesting doing some of these classroom circles through Zoom. But these kids were involved. Some of them, even with the cameras on and off, they were involved in the chat. They were, responding to all these questions and being a part of it to allow us to build community. And they got to build the reputation or the rapport with their teachers first, obviously, but definitely rapport building is important. And it's very difficult to do through technology. But I think for me, it's definitely was that, our focus is to build that tier 1 support, so that the students then feel comfortable reaching out, and it's about, I try and make a presence, even if it's me stepping into a class just to do a presentation. Like, I'll do career day, and then, oh yeah, I remember seeing Miss H, and so she seemed cool. Like, yeah, let me do a check-in with her. So when I pull them out of class because I got a referral, they feel a little bit more comfortable because I'm a familiar face. So I think that's part of what I've been seeing in the schools. But it's definitely hard with the parents. Some parents are like, yes, please, like, give my kid everything. But then we talk about access, right? And so, like, yes, I'm able to see any student there. But when we talk about medical insurances and, there's certain providers that only let you go once a month and things like that, Medi-Cal is actually a really good provider for mental health. I will say that's one of the easiest ways to get students access, but it's when they have the private insurances that we find the most struggles in connecting them to outside agencies. And so we try and have as much available. So we started an intern program. So now we get MSW interns in our schools. So, I'm hoping we can get them paid. I know the person before us was talking about unpaid internships are horrible, and I completely agree. Like we need these people paid, and that's something that we're trying to work through to be able to bring that to our interns. But at least we're providing those mental health services where they don't have the restrictions, because of course insurance, and that's a whole nother topic to go into.
Right.
But the limitations that it causes. So having as much access to services on campus is vital.
Yeah. Joseph, I want you to weigh in, but we just need to take a quick commercial break to acknowledge our sponsors. This is such a great discussion, and I just have some more questions, but we want to thank Donnie Glover of Black USA News and BeMoreNews.com just for this wonderful platform to showcase voices and representatives from various communities. Also want to invite you to tune in to Sister Biz with Nicole and Tamara on Wednesdays, and also Black USA Crypto News with Kamal Hubbard on Fridays. And also, we want to invite you to learn more about Miss Tammy Willis, owner of Magnolia Engineering and Construction. Please visit www.magnoliaengineeringandconstruction.com. And we want to be a part of growing with our community of Oakland, California. And connect with Magnolia Engineering and Construction now on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So thank you to our sponsors. Want to continue this wonderful discussion. So Joseph, I know that you've worked in the Bay Area and now have recently transitioned to collegiate mental health on the East Coast. Given that the fall semester is around the corner, don't want to say that as a professor right now because I'm enjoying every minute of summer, but what do you anticipate might be the needs of your soon-to-be clients or that student body?
Wow, how long's the show?
We don't have enough time, Joseph.
Right.
So I think I can kind of connect what your question was previously with defining what therapy is, and then connect that to what students will need. I think that there has continued to be recognition that the world is uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
COVID highlighted that in a different way. But I think we're acknowledging, students are acknowledging that it's always been uncertain, and there's always been movement, arguably chaos happening. Now we just took the time to slow down and acknowledge it. Or we had more time. Some of us had more time. Some populations are part of that, in that system where they've been living that their entire life. But if we're talking about students, I think when there is uncertainty, and a combination of uncertainty, curiosity, a safe relationship. I think oftentimes when we talk about therapy, there can be a common phrase that says kind of safe space. I don't necessarily subscribe to that idea of safe space because I can't guarantee that for every student. I question the root of safe space. Safe for who? What I do say in a session with a student is, I am a safe person. This is a safe relationship where you are free to explore whatever it is that you're navigating. And so I think that I think students are looking for some sense of permanence, something that is going to be there. So whether that's me just being available for a student, or someone being available and they don't have to question they never have to question that alone.
Mm-hmm.
I think young adults are in this place where they're maneuvering through a very polarizing world,
Mm-hmm.
left, right, red, blue, and so it can be really hard, and especially as young adults are exploring their identity, whether that's sexual identity, gender identity, racial identity.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many things being thrown at them,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how many opportunities there are for them, again, to freely explore
Mm-hmm.
their thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that whether that's a friendship, a parent, a family member, a therapist, a counselor, a social worker, whoever it may be, someone who is someone who's going to be there for them, and not necessarily tell them what to do, but just listen. Just listen. No.
That's a huge piece. Joseph, that is the hugest piece right there. Just listen. Just listen. You know, sometimes as parents and as caregivers and even some teachers, and you can possibly have ideas of colleagues and what you worked with, where a child expresses, well, this is how I'm feeling, this is how I'm thinking. Okay, well, don't feel that way and don't think that way. And then the young person is like, okay, well, then now let me be quiet because there's nothing else for me to say. You already told me everything I'm feeling. I can't feel that anymore. So the conversation ends.
Doug, we want to get you in before a second, because Katrina's going to have just a couple minutes before she transitions, as she has another commitment. I actually wanted to invite Katrina into the conversation, and also Dr. Burke. You both are parents. So I want you to put a different hat on, if you can, and shift your clinician hat to kind of, if you can share, and Katrina, if we can start with you, for our parents listening, how can they prepare their children to return to school?
I definitely think part of it is exactly what Dr. Burke was talking about, is listening to your kids, you know, giving them the space to talk about how they're feeling and validating their feelings and their struggles that they've all gone through. And just acknowledging it, that like, yes, this time has been tough, and like, what are your worries, and giving them the space. And I think allowing students to utilize the resources that they have access to, and knowing that they're out there, whether, you know, and school is such a good place to get connected to resources. Because if they don't have them there, there's typically going to be somebody there who can then connect you with who can do it on the outside. And so I think just really, giving them their space and providing that support for them, and doing check-ins with your kids. You know, I think there's just there's something about, like, I have a no phones at the dinner table rule. And so we're not on our phones, you know, that, and even if, you know, my kids are not talking about anything, like, you know, that's fine, whatever. We'll just sit there in silence then if you don't want to talk about it. But I'm going to ask about your day. You know, I'm going to ask about what your struggles were, or like, you know, what class did you enjoy today, or what was the highlight, low light? You know, we do that a lot. So I think just giving the space wherever you can, whether it's even in the car ride, or, you know, I know different parents have different capacities, but it's just finding that outlet wherever you can, even if it's a text check-in, you know, I mean, whatever you need to do to just know, let your kids know that you're there, so that they can then have that comfort. So definitely that piece. And I think also just, just not being afraid to reach out. And just know that, especially now, I mean, I will say that's one of the perks of the pandemic, is there are a ton of resources now, way more than there were, you know, and it just needs to be utilized. You know, I mean, we feel like we need to utilize them. And so I think just reaching out and looking into your communities and seeing what's out there, and not being ashamed of, you know, whether it is you had to get on food stamps now, or you're on Medi-Cal now, or you're going to the food shelter, or, you know, or the food bank to get food, or whatever it may be. Like, there's no stigma attached to it. I can't lie. I've used some of those resources, you know. I mean,
Mhm.
if I got a box of food and I can't find a family to give it to, like, I'm gonna take it home to
Mhm.
my kids, you know,
Mhm.
and that'll help, you know, because I mean, I don't know about you, Dr. Burke, but I know my food bill has gone up hundreds of dollars a
Mhm.
month because I got a 16
Mhm.
and a 10-year-old, and my 16-year-old eats like crazy, you know, and so I have no shame in if there's extra food boxes and they call me and say, hey, it's the end of our day and we've got 5 food
Mhm.
boxes left, I will take one, you know.
Mhm.
It will get eaten.
Oh yeah.
So I think just making sure that, you know, just letting parents know that there's support for them out there, for them and their families,
And I
and
want
just being,
to
yeah,
I want to
yeah, go
piggyback
ahead.
on something you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Mhm.
One of the things you said is making the time, right?
Mhm.
And then, so I 100% agree with you. As a mom myself, I
Mhm.
do exercise technological fasts, and
Mhm.
whether it be for an hour like dinner, or whether it be for a whole day, and that's pretty tough because when you take away the technology, you have to add in yourself, right?
Mhm.
And the support and the beingness of being present with them, right? So, but you can do like technological fast for an hour, like for dinner and things like that. One of the things I really liked about what you're saying is finding that time as to where
Mhm.
you can get it in, and just get it in, right?
Mhm.
Like, so let's say you have to go get gas. Take one of your children with you, just one, and how you doing? What's going on? And then you
Mhm.
can ask open-ended questions like,
Mhm.
so what was something that made you laugh today?
Mhm.
What was the
Mhm.
craziest thing that happened today? And they'll be like,
Mhm.
oh, oh. And then they'll start to speak and to open up. Find out who are their friends? Who
Mhm.
are the main players? And
Mhm.
why do you like them? Why are they your
Mhm.
friends? Right?
Mhm.
And just talking, just understanding that, but really, and you can even do creative things like helping your kid get dressed and say, hey, I can help you get dressed, or you want me to help you do your hair? I mean, I have a teenager daughter and she's like, no, mom, don't touch my hair. However, I used to be able to, but
Mhm.
it's okay. I can help her with all the products. And as I'm
Mhm.
handing her the products, right, we got to get our products in, and it's fine. And I can say, "Oh, how you doing? And what was it like today? And
Mhm.
really cool people online. And what's it like being online?" Just
Mhm.
ask.
Mhm.
Love that, Katrina. Thank you.
Love that
I'll
too.
I'll also say a big thing I've noticed with some of the younger, especially, but even with the high schoolers, is don't be afraid to monitor what your children are looking at.
Mhm.
I feel like there's a lot of
Mhm.
vicarious trauma happening because kids are having access way more than when I was I mean, when I was growing up, like I didn't know what suicide was in 5th
Mhm.
grade. You know, I
Mhm.
mean, that wasn't something that was I had access to, you
Mhm.
know, and so I think just the social media, look who their followers are or who they're
Mhm.
following, like who are they looking
Mhm.
at? And not being afraid to, you know, I mean, there's ways of being respectful to your monitoring. You know, obviously when they get older, you get that resistance and all of that. Like I have that with my son, but my daughter, like she knows, like, well, you don't need an iPad then if I can't look at what you're looking at, you know, period. But you know, I definitely think just the access so that those conversations can happen. Like I remember when 13
Mhm.
Reasons Why came out, all these like this
Mhm.
whole I was like, oh my
Mhm.
God, no, we can't, these kids can't see this. And it's like, well, no, why don't we use this as a conversation? Because these
Mhm.
kids may be hearing from us at school with other
Mhm.
friends. You know, like I had
Mhm.
5th graders that I have to do suicide assessment for. Like, you
Mhm.
know, and then I look at my daughter, I'm like, she has no idea what that is, you know, but at the same time,
Mhm.
like I'm paying attention to what is she talking about? What is she looking at? Do I need to have that conversation with her now?
Mhm.
You know, and when is it developmentally appropriate to have those conversations with your students, because they're going to learn it from someone else if they don't learn it from you. So I think just
Mhm.
not being afraid to monitor what they're looking at, and having those conversations, and not being afraid to have those, you know, courageous conversations with them about what it is that they're experiencing. What are they hearing from their friends? Do they
Mhm.
have questions? You know, did
Mhm.
they see someone vape during lunch and like, well, mom, what
Mhm.
was this thing that they did? You know, and it's like
Mhm.
they should feel that comfort to be able to come to you. Otherwise, yeah, they're gonna search for that information elsewhere. Or even if it isn't you, if you know that they have a parent or a friend,
Mhm.
or you know, like my kids have a great you know, an uncle that I know that my son can go to for anything.
Mhm.
You know, and I know that I trust what he's gonna tell my kids. And you know, so even if it's not you that they have the relationship, ensuring that you know who their support systems are and that they're aware of that
Mhm.
as well.
Mhm. Great points here, Katrina. I know you have to leave us, but I mean, thank you for the work that you've done again in the school systems on the front line, and also just being a stellar colleague. But we just want to thank you, and also Doug.
Please give Katrina my number. We are,
Absolutely, we're going to connect. We're going to
yes,
network and connect. Absolutely,
awesome. You are
yes,
amazing. Thank
yes.
you, sister.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, Katrina, thank you so much for being here. We'll probably be tapped to come back,
I
and
would
we're
love
going to
to.
continue the discussion. Thank you so much.
Yes. Nice to see all you. Thank you for having me so much. I wish I didn't have to leave, but yes, I
We're
would
gonna
love to come back. And
have
yes,
to do this again. This is
you
amazing.
guys are
I'm
amazing.
taking notes down. Please.
I'm-
All right. Thank you guys
Amazing.
so much.
thank you, Katrina.
Nice meeting you,
Oh,
Katrina.
wanting to continue the conversation again, as I said, listeners, this is an all-star panel. So I wanted to, Joseph, you and I have talked about Black mental health. We talk about being natives of the Bay Area. So I have a two-part question, but let me throw the first one to you, and Dr. Burke, I'll bring it your way. So first, out of all the mental health professionals, and we look at psychologists, 1% of psychologists in the country are African American. Okay. And then when we look at therapists, right, in the Bay Area, and just things that are happening in the Bay Area, you have done a lot of work uniquely in barbershops and other settings to create safe spaces for Black men to come and talk about their feelings. What can we do to encourage for our listeners? What can they do? What can we do to, if we can't get our Black men to therapy, right? Because that eventually is the goal. But before that, what can we do to kind of facilitate safe spaces to invite the Black men in our lives that we care about to talk about their feelings and just internal experience? So that's That's the first question.
I think this goes back to this concept of modeling. So how can you model this normalizing of mental health conversation? I think I'm hopeful because I'm seeing more mainstream conversation about mental health, whether that be through social media, sports, their entertainment, and that is a form of modeling. You're able to visualize mental health services or conversation. So I think one of the systems that I worked in was within athletics, and athletics specifically because I wanted to reach young Black men, period, Black males, period. And instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, and going to seek out where can I find them, well, sports seems to be embedded into our culture, our global culture, but very, I think, maybe unique in within the Black and brown communities, not only as form of status, also upward mobility, and yeah, and we all know about it, in some way, shape, or form. Similar to school, it's a common bond, right? Whether you watch, play, or it's just such a common part of our culture. So when it comes to specifically with Black men, I don't know. I don't think you can force anyone to do anything. They have to be ready to explore that part of themselves. And that's why I put such an emphasis on modeling. So if you are normalizing the conversation, if you're talking about it, depending on, again, also depending on the age group. Yeah, I guess this goes back to what both the other guests were talking about in terms of social networks. If we're talking about young adults or teenagers, well, who are you hanging around? Where, how, when you do bring up something really honest with your friends, what are their reactions? And if their reactions kind of put you down, not to say y'all can't be friends anymore, but it's time to assess, why am I friends with this person? Right?
Joseph, can I push a little more? I'm going to push. Here goes my therapy. Yeah. Okay.
Go.
Let's talk about, and during COVID, the relationship concerns that we heard about, different constellations. So let's imagine you're talking to people, the Black men in their lives, they come home or they log off and they're frustrated. You can see the angst, right? So in previous shows, for instance, Doug and others have talked about the work stress that they carried as they were battling various legal battles with Titan giants and internalizing those emotions, right? So let's go with Black males. What can we do to start those conversations? So Black man comes home and his spouse says, hey, babe, how was your day? Fine. I don't want to talk. I'll turn the game on, or just a shutdown.
Okay.
How can we, it gets real. It gets real.
Good.
So talk a little bit, because I do know that the end goal, here's my quick bias. The end goal, I hope, is for people to look at mental health and therapy as we look at the gym. The gym is not just a place to go and lose weight. It's a place to celebrate what our bodies can do and to strengthen our bodies, right? And to de-stress. I see you, Doug, with the flex. So looking at therapy the same way, just a place to enhance mental wellness, celebrate what's going well, work on what you want to improve. So talk to us, because you really, I have to really blow your horn here. You use the barbershop, a sacred space for Black and brown men, to access this. So can you talk a little bit more about the unique mental health needs of Black men? I know you may have to generalize some, but just to kind of plant some seeds for our listeners.
So let me shout out all the barbers who are therapists, not licensed, but who are listening to every single issue that Black men are going through. It is a really unique situation, and I can't give enough praise to barbers and the barber shop and the culture there. I don't know how many men, Black men, if we're talking about this, let another man get that close to them. Allow that, they let their guard down. They can kind of control the position of their head. And we know touching someone's face is very personal. It's very personal. But we let that guard down because, well, we can't get a nice cut if we don't let the barber do their job. But if we're talking about, in a relationship and a Black man comes home, and I want to preface this by saying, are we talking about a heterosexual relationship?
Yeah, we can, or just relationship conversation in general. Yeah, in general.
How long do you have? Has this become? I mean,
no, sure.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about a heterosexual relationship, which I have more experience with in supporting people, asking, not telling. So have you thought, being very honest, have you thought about talking to someone? What are what are some of the things that you're going through? That person would have to gauge if you're a spouse and you're not getting something from someone else, or your spouse. How patient are you going to be with that person? And understanding, I think also part of this is the education, all of our education, and understanding what the historical factors have been with communities of color and mental health. How if we understand a little bit more about how we got to this place, we might be a little bit more prepared to kind of nurture those people. And that's kind of hard to say, nurture with an adult. I know that's a very hard thing to do. We have to be extremely patient and meet people where they are at. I think it's a huge ask to have someone pretty much over the span of a month, a week, 6 weeks, depending on how long you've been in a relationship with them, for them to say, "Oh, I'm ready for therapy."
Okay. Now, let me take you just in a slightly different direction, being that you're a native of the Bay Area. So recently in an article by Jay Bartman, sfis.com, he reported that Oakland's homicidal rate is up 30% from last year, with the city averaging a new homicide every 3 days, and that there was a 47% jump in homicides from 2019 to 2020. In addition to that, with the impact of gentrification, in a recent study, they showed that San Francisco and Oakland are at the top of the list for the most gentrified cities. So when we look at young Black male mental health, right? If you had a magic wand and could implement something in the San Francisco Bay Area community targeting Black male youth, what would it be? I can't take off my professor hat, so I'm going to come with the question.
That's a phenomenal question. That's a phenomenal question.
Thank you.
And this is actually something I'm working on. I would reinstitute. I don't want to say mandatory, but I would strongly encourage and incentivize all Black males, all Black students, but for the sake of this conversation, Black males are this part of the conversation, to learn to swim. One of the things, and for all the listeners, I'll piece this together. I'll try to do it quickly. I don't want to take up too much time.
Right. Joseph, you have Black people out there like, huh?
So as we talk about mental health, vulnerability, one thing that I have seen in my experience, one of the more freeing experiences is learning to swim or be in water. And there is scientific research behind that supports health and wellness, intelligence. First and foremost, life-saving skill. A life-saving skill. And there's scientific research behind the success of students who learn to swim and continue to swim. Not only to be, successful in competition, but think about a health and wellness practice that you can take well into your 70s or 80s. What doors can open from there? I know it's maybe not as traditional as what some of the listeners have heard, in terms of like, oh, you have the wand, you can just, this is gonna erase violence. If you were upset and you wanted to go be violent, which I don't think there's anything wrong with forms of violence, where's a place that you could do it?
Hmm.
Well, water seems like a great place for it.
Hmm.
And I've seen that transformation not only in myself, but in young Black males that I've worked with the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, and so that in all, I'd say I would incentivize taking swim lessons for young Black males,
Mm-hmm.
and inviting the family to participate in those swim lessons.
Mm-hmm. That's so revolutionary for different reasons, because given the history of Black people's access to pools, and yet in California, and there's a generational aspect to that. Doug, I saw you jump in.
I have to tell you what you said, Joseph, hits home with me, and I'll be brief. It's hard for me to say that. I'll be brief. My dad took me with his friends on a boat one time. We were in the middle of Dr. Ashley, know where I'm going with this. And we were in the middle of the boat. My dad and I were the only two Black guys, and it was his white friends. And we were in the middle of the lake. My dad said, "Hey, look at that fish there, boy." And I looked over and he said, "No, right? That's a where, Dad?" And he booted me in the water.
Mm-hmm.
I never swam in my life. Dog paddle, but never swam.
Mm-hmm.
And his white friends are going, "Man, get that boy out the water." My father said he's going to learn how to swim.
Mm-hmm.
I was dog paddling, whatever you want to call it. But my dad said one thing: if you don't swim back to the boat, you're not going to make it. Guess what? I made it back to the boat, and I've been swimming ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to piggyback off of what you just said. Swimming, from that point on, I can remember my life changing, because my dad, when I got home, he said, "See, boy, don't ever think." And my dad's old. I think you remember my dad. My dad said, "Remember, boy, whatever you do, don't stop swimming and make it to the shore or the boat, wherever you're going." So that, and I'm not going to, but that was an excellent analogy of what we need to teach our Black boys and girls. Thank you.
I love that. I love that. You know what? It's so interesting. So when you first started, I was thinking about how could I answer this question from my experience, and it's really about people being able to get used to being vulnerable, right? And that's what I love about the intervention you're talking about. That's what I love about that, because you're using behavior to manage emotion. The thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors, right? They're all connected, right? And so you're using this physically allowing oneself to be vulnerable behaviorally, and then practicing to overcome that vulnerability and strengthen oneself, right? In addition, you're also talking about going into the water. Now, swimming, I'm thinking, Doug, I'm thinking about your story about dog paddling. Like, there's so much work, right? But one of the things that happens is when we're talking about emotion regulation, right? We think about the heart. And one of the big interventions, and this intervention comes out of the work of Dan Siegel, where he was talking about increasing one's heart rate in order to be able to regulate one's emotions. So I love how you said, get in there. And if you're feeling excess of energy, get in there and swim it out. You can swim it out, kick it out, punch it out. You can do whatever you want to do in the water, because there's so much resistance. And then what ends up happening is that heart rate changes and that beat goes on, and then the feelings change. The intensity of the emotion is not so high anymore. It's such a great intervention. I love that so much. You're making me think of not necessarily a behavioral emotional intervention, but you're also making me think of a cognitive emotional intervention for anger and managing anger and things like that. So, Ashley knows this, how I love the work of Dr. Kubler-Ross, and how we understand our emotions as human beings is all coming from two base emotions, right? Which is either love or fear, and that's it, right? And every emotion we feel is either love or fear. And so when we talk about anger, right? And we talk about managing anger and managing feelings and managing these emotions, because what ends up happening is in the Black community, anger is allowed. Anger is okay, because anger is a non-vulnerable expression of fear. Because anger is a secondary emotion, the primary emotion is fear. One of the cognitive interventions, and this works just like you're swimming, right? One of the cognitive interventions is understanding this fact. If anger is a secondary emotion and the primary emotion is fear, then we can ask ourselves every time we're angry, what am I afraid of? This is a very cognitive intervention because it allows one to stay in a love-based emotion. So we're love-based because it is cognitive, right? To stay curious is love-based, right? But to be angry is afraid, right? So staying love-based and then being able to manage those emotions. One of the biggest things is being able to ask yourself, because if you know this fact that the amount of anger that one feels is directly correlated to the amount of fear we hold, okay? And if we know this, then when we see one is really, really angry, instead of being afraid or fearful or unwilling to come up to someone, we can understand like, oh, they're afraid. Then all of a sudden compassion arises. Compassion is cultivated and we're able to manage that emotion. Now, here's the thing about this intervention is that anger is the non-vulnerable expression of fear, right? So it allows one to stay powerful, yet feel afraid, right? But if you are willing to do the work, and this is that part that you were talking about, Joseph, a person has to be willing to want to make these changes so they can ask within themselves and say, you know what? Okay, I'm really angry. And then ask yourself, okay, what am I afraid of? Because once you ask that question, you get curious and you reduce anger and it's not so big anymore. I love it.
Right. We have just a couple minutes left, but I want to have I mean, this has been an excellent discussion, and I'm thinking about our listeners who we're planting seeds, right? And I know we've talked about, supporting the youth in our life and whatnot, but I really want to talk to the adults here in this final question. Demonstrations of anger can be a sign to ourselves or to our loved ones that I may need to do some exploration. I may need to go and talk to someone. There are lots of things to be angry about, or a lot of emotions that we've survived in this pandemic or even before. But what are some other signs that you can look at, you suggest our listeners look for in themselves or others that say, it may be time for me to go and talk to someone? So I know managing emotions, difficulty managing emotions or anger, but are there any other signs? I want to throw out one for children just too. I know we're speaking about adults, is like isolation. So looking at your children, are they isolating? But are there any other kind of, we'll call them not warning signs or necessarily red flags, but maybe some yellow lights or yellow flags that people can kind of look out for to start that conversation about mental health and wellness?
Just to jump in, someone who feels feelings of sadness, which is normal, you can feel sadness, but if the sadness continues and continues and continues, and you don't even know where it's coming from, that is something to say, I think I need to understand what is happening with me. Like, I just feel sad and I don't know where it comes from. That's a yellow light right there, right? Or anxiousness, the continued feeling of anxiety always. And if you notice that you're going to bed and you just can't go to sleep. And this is not just one day, it's not just 2 days, not just 3. It is almost every day, and this is not usual. that's another yellow sign. You know, to slow down. Where's that coming from? Ask ourselves.
Great. And what about anything to add, Joseph, to that list?
If you wouldn't mind, could you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. So just thinking of some yellow flags, some kind of signs or signals that one could become curious, right? Get vulnerable with themselves, but just to kind of consider, is this a time to reach out to a loved one and just check in? Hey, are you doing okay? I've noticed you haven't really been yourself. Or if someone's doing their own self-reflection and figuring out, is this a good time to reach out to a therapist or kind of, again, start that stages of change, become curious about mental wellness. So we talked about, Dr. Burke mentioned, which is great, that, sadness, feelings of anxiety, anger, some sleep changes, but anything else that you would add for children, I put isolation or aggravation, but anything else you would add to the list?
I would piggyback on what Dr. Burke was speaking about in terms of sleep. How are you gaining weight? Are you starting to get headaches? To really start to look at, start to reflect on what's happening to your body. Usually those things start to express themselves, and for everyone is different. And then I think we've all done this, and maybe we'll say gauging the value in your relationships. Starting to have deeper conversation about what does this person bring to my life? What value do I bring to their life? And I think when you start, this is really, and I think this is the easy way to become isolated, right? You start to identify some of those relationships that you see as problematic, and then you take a step back rather than being vocal and addressing some of those complexities that come with relationships. And also, I would say developing, this is probably a whole nother episode on developing new relationships, which is especially as an adult, because we can oftentimes sit in with comfort and being putting yourself out there for, whether that's finding a friend, if we're talking about an intimate partner. Those are hard, and they get harder over time because we build up. We have the ability to build up some walls and some resistance. So being aware of your physical kind of status or your health, physical health, and being open. Being aware of that, and when things do happen, just be aware. And then, examining your relationships. Are they genuine? Do you feel like you can be authentic in those relationships? And hopefully when you start to have that conversation about, can I be authentic, you will explore what authentic means to you.
Wow. Well, Dr. Burke, Joseph Hancock, I want to thank you both for just contributing. Doug, I'm going to segue to you, but I just really have to highlight you both, and as well as Katrina, doing the work you're doing, and also just being, people that I could debrief with during COVID. I think it's really important to know just how much important networks are, and when you are a first responder, and just, again, navigating multiple roles. So thank you both. Doug, thank you also for letting us have this mental health segment. It's just so important to our people, to our listeners.
I just want to jump in really quick and say, mental health for Black people and people of color aren't just therapists.
No.
They are the
Yes.
priests, the
Yes.
pastors,
Yes.
the aunties,
Yes.
Joseph, the barbers.
Right.
All of these people, it is a person we trust.
Yes.
Just finding a person we trust
Yes.
that is a good listener
Yes.
can be very healing.
Yes. Absolutely.
Just want to throw that out there.
So, no, please, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just want to say this. This has been a dynamite show. And Dr. Ashley, Dr. Burke, Joseph, and Katrina, please come back anytime. Normally I'll get a double shot of Hennessy. At a 1, 2, 3, and Katrina make a 4 shot in 2 hours. So I'm buzzing. I am truly buzzing. All of you are amazing. And one of the things I want to stipulate to the listeners out there, and Joseph, I think you can relate to this, specifically with Black men. My dad was a great man. He is why I am who I am. But my dad used to say, boy, you got some problem? Go out in the backyard and take those rocks over there and you pick them up and you take them and put them on the other side of the yard. And if you're still worried and you still got problems, then you take those rocks that you put over there, then you put them back over there. So I did that a couple of times and I never told him I had problems after that because I didn't want to lift any rocks. But it's so important that our people understand that getting psychological help, getting therapists, professional people like you here on the stage, your priest, you're sometimes a doctor, but I want to specifically point out to the people who are on this stage today, you guys are doctors and masters, have degrees in this, and that's why our people are suffering so much because our masculinity for men, and I think Black women more so get therapy versus Black men. But let me be clear. Let me adjust that. White people get help all the time. And I want to say that again for the hearing impaired. White people get help all the time. Stop being scared. If you do not get help, you're not only hurting yourself, but you're hurting your family. Thank you, Dr. Burke. Thank you, Joseph Hancock. Thank you, Katrina. She's gone, but thank you, Dr. Ashley. Anytime day 1, 2, 3, or please, you're invited back because I have learned so much today, and our people now need this help more than ever. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
We're
you.
gonna wrap up thank you. We're going to wrap up this show today. And I'm listening to you guys. I'm kind of like, hey, but I want to wrap up this show today by thanking all of our guests here today. And I want to talk briefly about the Oakland Police Chief, Chief Armstrong. Now, for those of you who live in Oakland, Chief Armstrong was just promoted or assigned to be the chief of the Oakland Police Department in February. The city of Oakland is got me stuttering. Is suffering from a horrendous crime, killing, robbery, etc. Chief Armstrong has solutions. There is a coup in the police department that is trying to make him fail. Let me be clear to you behind the blue badge in Oakland. If you do not let Chief Armstrong do his job, the Black Business Roundtable, because Chief Armstrong is in business and that's the police business, we will identify you and point you out. Let this man do his job and let's clean this city up so that we can have a safe, sound, healthy city. And I had to put that out there before we close. We're going into 45 seconds or less. It is critical. Oakland is under siege right now. Chief Armstrong had a Save Oakland rally at Lake Mary, and I was thoroughly impressed with the things he had to say. He's getting out there on the ground level, talking to Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, and others, finding solutions to a problem that is destroying this city. We will not allow you to run this Black chief of police out. He is from Oakland, and brother, if you're listening, I got your back. Thank you all. We appreciate you. Janani, we got your back. God bless. Good night. Thank you.